Hey y'all, good morning. It's Ashley, and this is week 1 of the Breaking Free from Toxic Relationships series. I recorded this video last night, but I'm not sure what was happening with the video, so I have to re-record it. But this is just going to be my experience in a marriage I was in and also in the last relationship I was in. I'm going to try to keep these videos under 10 minutes. If y'all find the video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it, okay? All right, y'all, so let's just start, with the first guy I loved. So his name was Kenneth. I was 19 and he was about 21, and he and I were off and on a lot. So after about 2 years, I'd say exactly 2 years, we were off again. And there was this guy who had wrote me in my inbox on Facebook. And I was like, well, I'm seeing someone. And then he was like, well, we can just be friends. His name was Jamarcus. But when Kenneth and I broke up again, I was on Facebook. I would run a lot in those days. And I remember just sitting at the park, and I was sitting on a bench beside the lake, and I was just sad and crying. And I wrote on Facebook something about being heartbroken and stuff. And then Jamarcus was in my inbox again because, he was an opportunist. But then I started talking to him because I was like, man, I didn't have much going on in my life. All I had was like my part-time fast food job. I worked at Wendy's, and I had no social life. I didn't really have anybody to talk to. And I was like, well, he's somebody to talk to, and I could use somebody to talk to. So he lived 4 hours from me, but I found out he was from my hometown, and I think I was, attracted to that fact. He lived with his brother and sister-in-law, and he said he spent his time babysitting his nephew while they worked. I remember, him asking me what me and my sisters did for work. And, it's odd that he asked that because he didn't only ask what I did. He asked what me and my sisters did. Looking back now, I see that, he just always saw women as the provider. But I told him, I was like, well, I work at Wendy's and they work here. And he was like, all y'all getting money. Like, those were his exact words. And I'm just like, I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't consider it getting money. It's $7.25 and it's part-time. But I suppose that $7.25 an hour does sound like getting money to someone who is unemployed. I remember, the conversation turned to women giving money to men. And I'm not even sure how we reached that point, in the conversation. But I remember responding that, if I had the money, I would give it to anybody. And I recall him asking me to buy him a jacket one day, which didn't seem out of the ordinary, to me. And I didn't mind it because I felt like, oh, well, if it's a need. So the jacket was about $50, and, I purchased that for him online, and it was shipped to him. I didn't see it at the time, but that was a red flag. And I've learned that, people do things a little at a time. They'll ask for seemingly small things, and gradually they'll build up. They want to see how far they can go, how much they can get out of you, how much they can take and take and take. But I didn't know that was a red flag because I didn't know what a good man is. And I'm still learning what a good man is. So one day, y'all, he asked me to buy him a laptop so that he could do his schoolwork because he was going to start school for welding. And, we still hadn't even met at this point. And, again, my paychecks were really low because, again, I was earning $7.25 an hour, and I was working part-time because those were the only hours I could get. And my bi-weekly paychecks they were usually under $300. So it really stressed me out that he asked me that. I told him I didn't have it. And he responded that, it wasn't his idea, that I told him I would do it. He was twisting my words when I said that if I had it, I would give money to anyone. So I didn't have a voice, and I'm still finding my voice if I'm being honest. But I ended up giving him the $200, and it left me broke. And I remember I had a coworker, her nickname was Pooh, and she would give me rides sometimes to and from work. And, I would pay her gas money. I never paid her much. But I remember she told me I didn't have to pay her anything at all. And I just told her, I'm going to pay you something because there was a brokenness in me that wasn't accustomed to accepting love and sacrifice. I felt like I had to just, earn my way, earn my keep. So one day I told her, I was like, I don't have any money to pay you for gas. Can I just pay you next paycheck? And she was like, didn't you just get paid? She was like, what did you spend your money on? Like, what do you have to pay? And it wasn't an invasive question because, I knew even then that she had a wonderful heart. I told her, I'm like, the guy I'm seeing, he asked me for $200 and that took all I had. And she was like, well, if he really cared for you, she was like, well, Ashley, you shouldn't be giving him anything. And if he really cared for you, he wouldn't ask at all. And I didn't know how to respond to that because I didn't know how men were supposed to treat women. All I knew is that I had worked tirelessly at this fast food place and had just given my whole paycheck away, and it didn't feel good. But that was just an unfortunate preview of things to come. He was about 4.5 years older than me. The Lord kept giving me signs to walk away, but, I never did. I remember, even before we met, and I don't even remember how we got on this topic, but it came out that he had slept with one of my cousins. And I was thinking to myself, man, this isn't right. And I was telling him, wait, you slept with my cousin and you're trying to date me? And what made it even worse was the age gap. Like, she was 14 at the time and he was 22. And he also said that he had paid her for intercourse. He said he had paid her like $14. And, I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy has some problems. And I was just like, okay, I said, let me just pray about this. And, I just felt really uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to reject people and turn people down. So I just said, well, I'm just going to pray about this. Really didn't want to talk to him anymore. And, so he, again, he was very manipulative. He reached out to me again and he was like, well, my sister asked if you're going to judge me by my past. And I've been learning that you can be a person of love and still walk away. But, being naive, being manipulated, having no voice, having no resolve, I was like, no, I'm not going to judge you by your past. I'll continue talking to you. And he and I would read the word together a little bit. But I don't think, even doing that with him was benefiting me. I never learned anything from him. The only thing I ever learned from him, from the time I started talking to him throughout the marriage, the only thing I learned was how to fold socks. Never learned anything about the Bible, about Jesus, about morality, about life. I only learned how to fold socks. So he wasn't adding any type of value to my life. But he and I would read the word together, a little bit until we slept together. After we slept together, he would read the word less and less. And eventually he stopped altogether. So we slept together the day that we met. We met 3 months after we started talking. And I remember there was touching and, he wanted to go all the way. And I told him I didn't want to. I just didn't want to, period. And also, he didn't have a condom, and I didn't want to get HIV or anything. He told me he didn't have HIV. Not that he ever gotten tested. He was the 4th guy I slept with. I don't consider myself to have ever been promiscuous. I've only ever slept with boyfriends. Well, except this one guy who I'll talk about later, who I thought was a friend. But you don't sleep with your friends. But it's never okay to sleep with someone you're not married to. But he kept pressuring me, so I did it. And I was like, man, I started crying. But he kept, he wanted this to continue anyway. And then he finished. And, looking back, I'm like, man, how could, you keep going and even finish, if y'all know what I mean, while the person you're sleeping with is, literally crying. But it was over quickly, praise God, as it always was. Then I remember we went outside, well, oh my gosh, I'm not even going to mention. Okay, I'm going to say it. He fell asleep. And then shortly after, we went outside so that he could meet my sister and her husband at the time. And I was just feeling awkward. You know, he was just joking and making them laugh. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that just happened. And now we're just out here talking to people. I just feel really awkward. It was just a very weird experience. But I don't know. I guess it was just natural, like, for him. But I was just not feeling myself. So whenever I'd sleep with the guy, you know, I would get tested. And I found that men, a lot of them just don't get tested, which I think is just crazy. But he didn't give me anything, but he was also waiting to hear my results. Because again, he had never gotten tested. That's, oh my gosh. I recall hanging with Kenneth again because, you know, I still had feelings for him. But we went to my brother's house and we watched Reba. Wonderful show. And I remember I cut the time short because I was into, you know, Jamarcus at this point. I remember just telling him, you know, can you just like take me back to my parents? And, you know, it was good seeing you. And that was the last time I ever hung out with him in person. And I don't regret it. I had dreams of Kenneth prior to meeting him, so I thought he was my husband. But, you know, as you grow and you really reflect, you notice things in the dreams. Like, okay, you see his face, you see his desired occupation, you know, but you don't always notice, like, the lack of peace. You know, there was a lack of peace. The emotions, you know, weren't great. So that's something I didn't immediately notice. But yeah, I was like, I cut the time short because I was like, I thought I had a good thing with Jamarcus and I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to mess it up for, you know, a relationship that had been off and on for 2 years. I remember not liking his name, like not liking the name Jamarcus. And I remember I told him that, you know, he said he liked his name because it's the name his mother gave him. But I never liked that name. I don't know why, I just never have. I remember even when I was a teenager, I told my cousin Jamarcus, I was like, hey, sir, I don't like your name. And he just looked at me. But during that time, y'all, my father he was battling a crack cocaine addiction. And I remember he would just always be like, oh my gosh, just verbally and emotionally abusive, you know, to the family the Lord gave him. And I remember I would just complain about him to Jamarcus. And Jamarcus was like, well, you can move in with me and my brother and my sister-in-law. He was like, I'll just have to ask my brother. And I said, no, I'm fine. You know, something within me was just feeling, you know, if I marry this guy, my life is really going to be over. But I just remember him coming back and texting me things saying, my brother said that you can move in, try to transfer your Wendy's job. He was like, just texting me a list of his brother's demands saying, no singing, you know, don't sing. I remember he had mentioned marriage before, prior to us even meeting. At this point, you know, when he was texting me his brother's demands, I believe we had already met. I remember I visited, you know, his brother's house, and I remember just singing in the shower and Jamarcus, you know, banging on the bathroom door because they didn't want me singing. So at this point, Jamarcus is texting me his brother's demands saying, no singing, don't talk about God in the house, don't push God on us. And I kind of blew up at him because I'm like, oh my gosh, why are you texting me this long list? I told you I did not want to move in with y'all. And he and his brother and sister-in-law couldn't understand why I was upset. I love singing, y'all. Nobody's going to tell me I can't sing. I remember, like, later on when I married him, like, I would sing often and he would hate it. He would tell me to shut up. And I'm like, some wives aren't even happy enough to sing. Not that he gave me any reason to be happy, but I guess there was just like a joy within me that just wanted to sing. Like, I've always just enjoyed singing. But yeah, y'all, I think I forgot to mention, he was like, oh, you can move in with us because, you know, you want to get away from him and we can go ahead and get married because I know you don't want to live in sin. And looking back, I see that that was the enemy saying that, using those words, I know you don't want to live in sin. No, I don't want to live in sin, but I don't want to live in deception either. So y'all, I'm trying to keep these videos at 10 minutes or less, and it looks like we're already over that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here, and when I come back next week, we will talk about why I decided to marry him, and yeah, we'll just continue the story from there. So please share this video to whatever hearts you feel need it. This is a 10-week series. And again, I'll be just talking about breaking free from toxic relationships, my experience. Love you guys. God bless, and I'll see y'all next week.